3, 2, 1, and we're live. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Village Made podcast. My name is Moveo Heimuli, and today I'm excited. Well, before that, let's go ahead and pay the bills. Shout out our sponsors, C4 Designs. Go ahead and check out his shirt. Village Made Podcast is on c4designs.com. And you can use VMP 15 to get 15% off all your purchases. Also, shout out to our other sponsor, AV Build Utah. Man, today I'm excited. I'm excited because I have, just growing up in Laie, growing up in Koku, just the culture that's there. I don't think anything outside of it, or not that I didn't think anything outside, but it's just what it is because that's all I know. Yeah. And so today we have a special guest, and with the way that he was born and raised, the way that he was raised, it's different, or we get to hear a different perspective and what it was like growing up in Laie and being part of the Polynesian culture, although being born white, or with the Palagi is what we call it,
Palagi, yep.
And so, man, today we have Kyle Vreeken. I appreciate the time, living all the way out in St. George, but he made the time to come out. I mean, we're going to throw this out there. He didn't only come out to do the podcast. I don't want to make it seem like he just came to do the podcast.
I'm humbled and grateful to be here. So
yeah, so he was here to do, on business, and so appreciate it. But you know how this goes. Let's just get into it. Where were you born and raised? And let's talk about the story of your names. Who named you? The meaning of your names, and I guess just your family.
So I was born in Seattle. My dad is from Los Angeles, Southern California. My mom's actually from Michigan, outside of Detroit. And my family was living in Seattle for about 8 years. And then we moved to Hawaii in 97, which was when I was turning 7, just starting second grade in Laie Elementary. So that's how we ended up on the island.
That's kind of cool because that's usually when I have another poly on, I ask their migration story. So for you, your migration is from Seattle to Hawaii.
Yeah, and there's a kind of cool story about that, about how, more credit to how it's a village out there and just everybody's got each other's back. My parents actually went on their 10-year anniversary to Hawaii, and my dad, they were like staying at Turtle Bay and ended up just going to one of the local wards in Laie. And he's like, he had 2 questions for I think it was like the elders quorum. He said, "What is there to do over here at night?" And they were like, BYU game room. And then the second question was, what is it like work out here? What is work like out here? And they were like, well, what do you do? He's like, I'm a photographer. And he's like, well, just so happened that Spencer Kamoha, the community photographer, is right here in the ward. So long story short, basically said, hey, prom is in 3 weeks. If you stay, you got a job. And so, it's just everybody looking out for each other. Is like our first experience of being part of the village. So 3 months later, my dad basically stayed, checked it out, got a place to stay, made sure everything was legit. Because he's like, really? We just came to Hawaii and I think I just got a job.
Right.
Ended up, my mom came back, got us all up, and we flew out to Laie. So that's how we got there.
Dang, that's cool. Especially, just what you just touched on was the village aspect, and he felt the village vibe already. And so that's cool. And then I guess the second part of the question is your names, who named you and the meaning of your names.
So, it's definitely not a fun story like how it is in the Polynesian culture, right? My name is Kyle Alexander Vreeken. To be honest, I've asked my parents, I think it's just like, we like the name. I think I was going to be like a Tyler if I wasn't Kyle. But I think my dad had a friend whose dog name was Tyler. So they were like, we'll go with Kyle instead. And that's kind of the story. So it's not really like my name was given to me by anyone special or it means anything. Yeah. But, that's just one more thing that I appreciate about, from what I've learned, everything, with the Polynesian culture and things like that. So, so that's my name.
Yeah, that's cool.
Nothing more to it.
Kyle Alexander
Vreeken. Yeah, my older brother his middle name is Abraham. And that's my dad's middle name, and that's grandpa's middle name, and that's my grandfather,
so
my great grandfather. Cool
story
so
he's
way. Got the story. He's got the name passed down for like 5-6 generations. But me not being the firstborn, so I wasn't given anything special, nothing like that. But
and how many siblings?
I'm the middle of 5.
Okay.
Yep.
That's crazy. So you mentioned that you were born in Seattle, but raised in Laie. So talk about childhood and what childhood was like for you growing up in Laie.
Yeah. I mean, I just loved it. I think I had the best childhood. I mean, when I tell people about it, people are always like, oh, you grew up in Hawaii, but that's not really why, you know? It's not because we had the beach right there, but it's just because we had such an awesome childhood. We lived on the Point when we first moved there. And so we had the Te'os across the street from us. We had, and you know, they're Samoan, Hawaiian. We had the Nagis right in front of me, which are, you know, Tahitian. We had the Maiwiriwiris for a time, they're Fijian. We had the Fotus and the Tafunas and the Tongas, which are Tongan. And then we had the Ka'ulula'aus, which are Hawaiian. Oh, yeah. And then we had the Tomas, you know, who are like part Japanese, Haole. Then we had, you know, just so many families. Yeah, cultures, we had the Toluta'us, you know, Tongan family. So at any given time, there was like 10, 20 of us kids all around the same age who was on the street, who was playing football or playing basketball or street hockey. I don't know if anybody else in Laie was, but when we had some friends that, you know, when D2 Mighty Ducks was out, for some reason we was playing street hockey, jumping point all the time, catching chickens. I mean, if your house got egged anywhere between Foodland and Temple Beach, that was probably us, but my bad. That was 20 years ago, not anymore. So yeah, it was good fun playing at the park, just anything outdoors. But we also, you know, had Halo tournaments, played Madden. It was just a good fun time. Had a lot of friends all together, and I probably slept over at like the Tafunas or the Toma's house more than I slept at my own house. So but it was good fun.
Dang, sounds like childhood was crazy, or, you know, was a good time for you guys. You mentioned that you had, like, you guys were rolling in a pack. Did that pack ever leave the Point? Or did you guys only stay on the Point?
No, so funny thing is, I never even lived on the Point for more than like 4 years. So we actually moved to Hau'ula.
Oh, okay.
And of course, those weren't my only friends, but yeah, we had a lot of people coming and going. And we lived by Kakelas. We lived on Homestead Road in Haula Homestead. So a lot of different friends and families growing up, especially playing football too. I mean, ever since Ko'olauloa Red Raiders, you know, your friendships grow from across the whole island, you know, so.
Yeah. Dang, that's awesome. I mean, growing up also, what were some of the, like the culture in the home or the traditions that were taught to you, you know, at home?
You know, when we talk about culture, we're so used to it being so deep rooted in traditions and language and things like that. For me, I mean, I feel like the gospel culture was probably the deepest culture that we had. You think about it being Palagi, right? I'm German, I'm Dutch, I'm English, I'm all these different things, but I don't necessarily feel like that's my heritage. Like, I'm not necessarily proud to be a German or, you know, from the Netherlands because I'm American. So it was a little different. I mean, we just kind of grew up, and it was always something that I was intrigued with the culture that was so rich in the homes of my friends that you just learn by watching. You know, you say that from other podcasts you've had. You just learn how it's supposed to be. So for me, yeah, it was interesting to have our own family life, but then be seeing the other cultures, you know, in my day to day and in my friendships. When you went outside, which, you know, is family to me. So it was something that you just come to embrace, you come to love. And I know a lot of people have had different experiences. A lot of people being haole in Hawaii, sometimes they feel like, oh, they're discriminated against and things. But for me, like, I loved it. Like, I always felt like there was something to learn. There was something to embrace. And my identity, I knew who I was. Like, I wasn't trying to be Polynesian, I knew like my identity was I was the white kid from Laie. Like that's just how it was.
Right.
I remember being in 3rd grade for May Day at Laie Elementary. We danced for Elvis or something, and everybody was getting their sideburns drawn on to be really long to look like Elvis. And it was my turn, and they were like, "We only have a black and a brown pen." So I have a picture of me with blonde hair with like black sideburns, just because like I was the only one there that had that. But yeah, I feel like any differences that there was, I never felt like I was hated for being haole. Maybe you get called that, but you don't feel like, oh, that's not me. Like I don't fit the description of somebody else who might be coming and, fitting the stereotype of the haole who's coming to take, that's something that I've learned is, you don't let the stereotypes define you. You learn so much about who you really are, just by the life you live, but also, you don't have to fit into a box. You don't have to be what people are telling you are, because exactly what does it mean to be a white person in Hawaii? I mean, the life I was living, that's what it was to be a haole in Hawaii.
Could also be different for each person.
Yeah, it's different for every person. And
for you, that's what it was, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think a lot of what happens right now is that there's just misunderstanding. You don't take the time to really understand what someone's been through, where they're coming from, why they feel a way. Like if that's ever the case, you just have to learn. And so that's something that I really am grateful for growing up in Hawaii, being able to understand so many different diverse backgrounds and cultures and traditions. It's really something you come to love, So I don't feel like I ever didn't fit in, because I just, was embraced by everyone else, and I also loved everyone equally. So, yeah, it was good.
Dang. That's so cool that you brought up, being born and raised, or not born and raised there, but being raised there, and not at any point did you feel, like left out, or did you feel that you didn't fit in? But I feel like that's also the perspective that you had, or just like the way that you lived your life was just, this is just who I am,
Right.
But when can you talk about also like playing football and how that was, I guess, playing football at Koku?
Yeah. It was no surprise that I wasn't the most athletic one on the team. And so I just had to play hard. I just did the best that I could, tried to keep up with everybody. But man, like the friendships that you make as a team, like that's something that you have for life, I loved it. It was always fun. Just playing with people that you're friends outside the field, but when that whistle blows, you give it all you got. You go head up with anybody. And that's one thing that I learned too. Like I was never going to be the biggest on the field. I was never going to be the fastest, never going to be the strongest. But I knew, when the momentum is coming, if you ain't giving it full speed, you're going to lose every time. So I had to, give it my all. And so that was my experience at Koku. Like I never started. My junior year, right? I was playing with all Sifa them. Yeah. Like I was a DB. I was always on defense. So I'd rather hit somebody than get hit. Was my philosophy. I played defense my whole life. But yeah, I was like Tiave and Pizza Tanuvasa. All those guys was like starting again above me, right, as a junior. And then as a senior, it was like Tiave's younger brother Buddha was like starting over me as a junior. I was like, hey, you know what I mean? I can't say it's favoritism. Like these guys got the skills, So, yeah. But
well, I guess for me, I was just asking that because thinking about you grad in what, 2008?
2008, yeah.
So was that Manti 2008 as well?
He was 09.
09. Did you play Punahou when you were at Koku?
No, we played St. Louis our junior year, and then I I think we might have played them for a preseason game.
Oh, okay. No, I was just asking if you were, because you know, running on the point, you know, with your friends, being friends with Manti and Robbie.
Yeah.
Did you ever face them? You know what I mean?
No.
When they were at Punahou.
No,
you know?
yeah. A lot of my childhood memories, funny that you bring it up, was like training with Uncle Brian and Manti and like Shiloh and all the Te'os too. When we were just in Pop Warner days, like you can tell, man, those guys put in work for sure. They earned their spot and their skills. I remember came to a point where we knew during the summer, like 4:30, we was on the street running sprints, running a mile, running hurdle. Like we would run up the hill to go up the point. We would run up run up the hill, the dirt hill that goes the side. There was even times where it'd be like, oh, it's 4:30K, let's all stay inside. So Uncle Brian will catch us and make us train with Manti and Robbie them. So yeah, that was a lot of our childhood too, being up on the point. So
that's
man,
that's fun. Yeah, that's awesome that you know described childhood, and it was, man, sounds like a lot of fun. But what I want to get into now is talking about shout out to Laie and the podcast that you were on last week. And talk about that experience, especially for, you know, our viewers. If you haven't yet, go check out their podcast, To Laie. It's on Instagram, and Kyle was a part of it. And so I just wanted to, you know, put this out there as well. A lot of people have been asking about asking me about these podcasts that have been coming up, and that, you know, the people have been starting. And so I just want to throw this out there that I'm happy, you know, I'm glad that we need more of these voices, you know, for us to share our stories, not only my stories, but, you know, Kyle's stories, but the stories that they're sharing as well. You know, I'm glad and I'm happy, and, you know, there's more than enough room for all of us, you know, to not only create these stories, to share these stories, but also for us to enjoy each other's, you know, the stories that we're sharing. But yeah, go ahead and talk about how that was with you, with being on To Laie, and just your experience on that.
Man, it was really good. It's humbling when they reached out saying that they had thought about having an episode about, you know, mental illness, and that they had thought of me. You know, I don't look to myself as like being an advocate or being out there and like being a leader or an expert at all. So it was humbling that I was able to share my perspective on what my wife goes through with her mental illness and all that I've learned through that. They're awesome, man. Everything that they share on all their episodes, and the great questions that they were asking. Like you said, I mean, you can't share enough about any topic, right? There's so much that can be learned. There's so much that can be had.
So many points of views.
So many points of views and perspectives. And I mean, when is it ever more important in the world than right now to try to learn from somebody else and understand what it might be like in somebody else's shoe and where somebody's coming from. And so, I mean, growing up in the village, it kind of gave me that perspective of being like, you know what, your world isn't the whole world. Like, there's other people who have completely different experiences, completely different cultures and traditions. And I mean, so for me, it was just more the same. Everything that I learned growing up, it just kind of played into my marriage with my wife, of learning, like, you know, where are you coming from? What is this all about? And so I think To Laie, you know, is doing a great thing, bringing a lot of these topics to light too. So it's a different topic, of course, than what we're talking about today, but right. It was awesome to share. And it's always touching to know that, you know, what you might be going through is helping someone. So hopefully, you know, the same comes from this. I know there's a lot of Palangis out there in the world that can be learning from other cultures. So,
man, that's cool. And then I guess just going off of that, for me, for everyone that's, you know, starting a podcast or, you know, broadcast or whatever it is, you know, as we continue to, you know, work in and perfect our craft, you know, this is the best time for us to do that. And this is for me also, you know, in working to perfect my craft, because one day, you know, we'll be able to, instead of allowing an exec in New York or allowing someone in Hollywood to tell our story as Polynesians, you know, I want to be the one to tell our stories, or To Laie, or any of these Rising King Media, or, you know what I mean, with Quaid and his podcast, or just anyone, you know, as Polynesians, we want to be the ones telling our own stories. And so as we continue to perfect our craft,
Right.
you know, one day we're going to be the ones, and not allowing media or not allowing someone else to tell our stories. And so that's basically, you know, what I wanted to touch on with that. But man, it's a great opportunity to have you both, you know, have you to speak on their podcast and on coming on the Village Made one as well, you know. But I'm just grateful that I also have the opportunity to ask you about just some of these questions about why Laie is so unique, you know, and with the perspective that you have, there's some things that, you know, we can touch on. And also, just like what you mentioned with being the Palagi, that other people in the world can learn, you know, that there's like more, you know, that we can learn. And so I think just wanting to talk about with why Laie is so unique with and you already mentioned and touched on it, you know, growing up on the point with the different nationalities or, you know, different ethnicities that were up there on the point with you, and why Laie is a melting point. Sorry, not a melting point, a melting pot. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, the melting pot?
Yeah, I mean, what other place in the world, really? I mean, do you have so many different cultures, languages, traditions, histories? I mean, literally every part of the world. And so it's a blessing. I feel really blessed to be able to have that as my childhood, you know? So some of the things that I just absolutely love, that for me, the reason why they stick out to me, because like you said, it's everything that you knew. It's life for you. It's just how it is. It is how it is. But for me, because it wasn't taught in my home, it was something that I observed. It's something that I learned. It had a little bit more of an impact. I'm not going to say it didn't have an impact on you guys, right? But what I'm saying is I had to step out of my own shoes and realize, wow, it's interesting how this is done and why I feel like it's so valuable in life. I mean, the whole idea of being raised by the village is just such a perfect way to put it. I mean, you think about like Hanai families, right? You think about how there's really no formal adoption. Like if my kids or my cousins or my aunties and uncles, you know, ever called me up, or if I ever called my family up and said, you know, hey, this is the situation, you know, and there's a lot of different reasons why people are raised by different family members, but the fact that it's all kept in the family that's just mind-boggling to me. Like I said, I can never imagine a family member from my white family calling me and being like, hey, can your cousin come stay with you? Be like, that's the most awkward call. Be like, no, sorry. Like, I don't know if that happens in other places or parts of the country, but I think that's really unique to the Polynesian culture, you know, of being able to always rely on each other as family. I mean, that's pretty powerful, to whether it's from birth or whether it's, hey, just go stay with grandma back in Samoa and go learn a little bit about your roots, or see how easy you got it, or hey, you're having trouble in school, okay, go, you know, or go play for kuku, like even whatever it might be. Like, that's such a powerful thing to know that you don't even got to ask twice. Like, it's an automatic. Yeah, I'll raise you like you're my own. Like, that's awesome. That's something that to me would never fathom in my, you know, in the white culture in America. So that's something powerful too.
And I guess an example of that is just you spending more time on the point, even though you moved to to Ho'ola, right?
Yeah.
And then you just were able to be like basically a Hanai to whoever on the point wanted, you know, wherever you slept there. So
shout out to the Fotus, the Tafunas, the Tongas, you know, all the families over there that raised me when I wasn't at home. So yeah,
that's awesome. And also with the village like mentality, or the village, the culture of like being one family and being in unity. Can you talk about like just the phrase, that's my cousin, you know, and then having that like as like, oh, anyone you see, be like, oh, because he's Polynesian, oh, that's my cousin.
Yeah, I mean, it's used as a joke, right? You know, like my mom's from Detroit, right? So like, you know, oh yeah, Eminem, that's my cousin. Like, you know, you hear the joke all the time, right. But at the same time, you know who your cousins are. And you know what's even more interesting to me too is like, growing up, it was always funny because everybody's related, right? On our side of the island, I'd be like, oh, how are you related to so-and-so? They'd be like, oh, my grandma. It'd be like, your grandma what? And they're just like, oh, just my grandma. And that's all that was needed to be said. My grandma somehow is related to his grandma. That's even by marriage. Like in my family, there's first cousins that I don't even speak to. And the fact that we even put labels on it, right? Second, third, fourth cousins just goes to show like the disconnect between family. I mean, there's a lot of people, if they're my second, third cousins, like I don't really even consider them like family. Mm-hmm. I mean, my name Vreeken, I almost can trace back all the Vreekens that came to America are from my great-great-grandfather and his brother. So if there's a Vreeken in America, like we're related and we can trace it back. But since moving to Utah, I've like become friends on Facebook with a lot of the Vreekens, but I don't really know them, and I don't necessarily even consider them family. And so it's so interesting being back home and everybody's like, you know, you joke about it. Oh, you better know your cousins, otherwise you're gonna be kissing your cousin. Yeah, exactly. You'll be married. But that's the joke about it. But really, how cool is it that you know all of your grandparents' names, right? It's not just Vreeken. It's I know my grandma's maiden name and your grandma's maiden name and everybody's family and how you're related, and whether it's through marriage or whether it's just by, oh, that was my grandpa's best friend growing up, you practically family. Like, I love that. That's really cool. You just take ownership and you take responsibility and love for everybody that's in your family. So that's something that I've definitely held on to.
That's cool because I always say, you know, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And with that mentality of, you know, no matter whose child you are or no matter, you know, your cousin, uncle, you're still going to get slapped, you know, if you do something wrong by your uncle or auntie.
Oh,
or
and you better
parents.
Believe they give you permission. Oh, if you see my kid out there, you have permission.
Exactly.
But, oh, yeah, you even talked about that, aunties and uncles. Like, when you call everyone auntie and uncle, they're not your legit auntie and uncle. That's weird. Like, I've heard stories of people coming to the mainland and their kids are calling their teacher, oh, auntie, can I do this? And the teacher would correct them. I'm not your auntie. Like, you know, because we use it out of respect.
Right.
Because the idea of we're all one family, you know, is the point. And so that's really cool that, you know, we do that. I don't know if that's unique to Hawaii to call everyone auntie and uncle, but
yeah. I think also it's unique at PCC. You know how the guided tours, they call cousins. Yeah, and so they try to like perpetuate, you know, our culture onto the tourists that come.
Oh, yeah.
And just using you know, that what we, you know, how we use it and be like cousins or they don't say uncle and auntie, you know, during the tour guides, but they call them cousins, you know, like cousin.
Yeah, PCC is great. I mean, it's entertainment, but at the same time, if anybody leaves PCC and has learned even one thing from the Polynesian culture, they're blessed, you know? So I feel grateful that was my entire life, you know, that was my entire childhood. And so, yeah, there's so much that can be learned from the Polynesian culture. And like you said, you should have every opportunity and you should take advantage to be the one to tell your stories, to pass it down, because there's so much treasure and knowledge and stuff that the world can benefit from. So I hope that you guys, you know, take pride and that people, you know, take every opportunity to teach and pass that down.
That's amazing. Thanks for that. Yeah. I mean, as we continue to work on it, you know, that's something that we're trying to do. And so, can I ask you, like, I don't know if this is too personal or not, but asking about getting lickings. Did you get lickings from other uncles and aunties? And were your parents okay with that? If you did?
You know what? That's an interesting one. I think I might have had a slipper or something thrown at me once or twice, but it was always deserved. I always felt it was never anything I was gonna run home and tell my mom, "Hey, auntie went and licked me." No, nothing like that. But you know, it's always interesting too, because you're over at your friend's house, right? And they start getting lickings, and everybody just like pretend they're not
looking
there.
The other way.
You know, looking the other way. And then you go home and you feel like, you know, you can get away with anything almost. You know, it's an interesting dynamic to see. But the one thing that for sure I feel that was ingrained in me was that you have respect, you learn respect, right. And that you learn that there's there are things that you should know better to do, and you shouldn't have to be asked twice about, and so I feel like I took that home. I don't think I ever had a conversation. It just, something wasn't in my home. Like I never had the conversation where my mom was like, yeah, tell me if anybody licks you. It was almost opposite. They were just part of the community too, where they're like, oh yeah, good for them.
Yeah.
So, I remember the only time really for me personally that I would say I got lickings was when I was in high school, and I think I went, talk back to my mom. I cussed at her or something like that. And my dad went, grab me and tell me, you don't ever say that to mom, and that's something that when you're not used to it, it's shocking,
Right.
But for you guys, or for anybody who's raised that way, it was always funny to me.
Expected or the norm. Yeah.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because isn't it almost that like there are times when you're around with the boys and you're almost bragging how much you got lickings,
right.
And as a white boy, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I never got a licking. You're almost like shamed. You're almost shamed to be like, oh yeah, I never get lickings. Everybody's like telling their stories. Oh yeah, I remember this one time I had to grab or this or that. It's funny, but
That's funny. Now that you bring it up, that we actually do sit around and be like, remember that one time?
Yeah.
Like mom and dad did this. Yeah. So you know what I mean? Uncle and auntie.
So in a way, it's almost like I was raised seeing the I wouldn't say the obedience, but like the respect, and I was raised seeing how that was, but I was almost like privileged that I never felt the pain of it. Right. You know what I mean? But it like, the lessons were engraved just by seeing like aunties and uncles, how they taught principles that were life principles. Really, it wasn't just about like, I always felt like when it was somebody getting lickings, it was the principle of the thing. It was never just like, oh, something menial, but it was like the principle is you don't disrespect this, right? Or you don't cut me off. When I'm having a conversation with another adult, you walk past, you bow, and you say too low. Like you know what I mean?
Right.
It's the principle of it. So I felt like I was blessed because I got to learn all of those principles, but I didn't necessarily have to go through the discipline of it. So
dang, that's amazing that you brought that up. That now that thinking back on it, like, I mean, just going back to the beginning, that's just how we lived it. But for you, to participate, but not actually participate, I mean, take part, but not, with the lickings right. and stuff. But another principle or not principle, I guess, another thing that makes us, why Laie is so unique is that I want to ask you about, and then you can elaborate on it, is talking about like the fe'aus, doing the chores and doing, the fa'alaves or different stuff like that.
Right.
What was your perspective or, your take on those things?
Yeah, that to me was a really big one. I mean, it's not just like the house chores. And I don't speak someone, you're going to correct me on this, right? But when I think of the word, there's fe'aus that needs to be done, that could be preparing for a funeral. That could be preparing for a wedding. That could be really anything, whether it's prepping the food, it could be cleaning up the house. And so that was something that, to me, I absolutely loved. Like when there was a passing in the community, there was no questions asked. It was just like, whose house, where are we at? Yeah. Where are you at? And everybody's together. People are donating, whether it's, case waters or food or just service or just being there or setting up the tent or whatever talents or resources or abilities you had, you were there to offer it. And to me, that's huge. It goes way beyond, start a GoFundMe. Like you are offering right. everything you have. And that's what more can you give than your time and your love? So I love that,
I think it's cool too that you mentioned that, because even if, I mean, whenever I showed up, I'd be like, oh, just look at whatever needs the most help, and then I'll go do that, you know, because it's just when you see something that needs done, you go help, and you know. So
and for me, it was fun too, because I was learning a lot. So I would go
learn how to put up the tent, or learn how to barbecue.
I mean,
you know?
I remember, you know, for the first time from start to finish, actually doing the umu, right? And like, the fire and the hot rocks, and then you put the pin. Like, to me, I'm over there intrigued, just wanting to learn, and like feeling like I'm part of the family. So I think I paid attention a little bit more to the details and how things are done. And I mean, you think about the Tongan funerals, right? You think about the time leading up to it, and how people come, whether it's, oh, we were employees and we worked together, so the whole group of employees come and present something,
right?
Or, you know, we're friends from this group, or, you know, and everybody comes together, or we're classmates, so we're going to show up as a class. Like, to me, I thought that was amazing. Just how everybody came together. It really was like one big village. And so there's a lot to learn about the different cultures too, even like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but just what I've observed, you know, like, if whoever is the patriarch, or if you're an elder in the Samoan community or whatever, and you're there, like, if he's sitting on a chair, you don't sit higher than him, right? You kind of you either sit on the ground or you sit. And so there's like different things that to you guys might just be like, that's how it was. Yeah. But for me, I was like, there's so much behind why that is, that to me it was like mind blowing. So I just soaked it all in, and I just, you know, I learned a lot from it. And I think a lot can be said too about the respect for the elders, and like for your kupuna, the mana'o, like the wisdom from your kupuna is so, it's almost approached with like a reverence, or like there's a sacredness to it.
Right.
Like, because everything's being passed down, whether it's traditions or whether it's knowledge, is like, there's just so much respect towards it. I feel like nowadays in white America, like, people look at the older generation. Yeah, you respect your grandpa, but oh, the old geezer over there, like, who are you? You know, you probably only passing down like stuff that's gonna negatively, you know, affect me. Like, I feel like that's a mentality. I don't know if you've ever heard recently, there's a phrase going around. It's like, okay, boomer. I don't know if you've heard it. Look it up. Like, people around here be like, okay, boomer. And it's just like, basically, okay, which is a whatever. Negative connotation. Yeah, it's just like, you know, the baby boomers, right? You're just like, okay, boomer, whatever, man. Wow, like, you have nothing, like, anything you pass down to me is not valuable. Whereas it's so opposite back home, right? On the island, it's like, man, everybody's going to sit down and take a lesson from Kumu, right? You're going to learn right now. And if you don't give it a reverence and a respect, man, you're missing out, number one. And number two is like, you're just showing your colors. You're just showing that you have the respect. You have coming back to the respect, and you're just really not showing that you can have the capacity to love and understand. Like, maybe that's taking it too far. Maybe that's saying like, oh, you're reaching there, buddy. But no, like, if you think about it,
I understand. Yeah.
You know. And at my time at BYU, I always used to like have conversations with all the howlies that would come to BYU, and I'm like, man, you guys just need to learn. Like, it's you can't just come over here and expect that it's just another state and just think that you're gonna get however it was back home for you. Like, you need to realize that you are a guest on this land, you know. And there's so much that can be learned, and I'm sure we'll talk more about different aspects of that too. But
and then how you mentioned or touched on the Palangis or the Howlies that came from the mainland. When they ask you, oh, where are you from? Did they expect you to say something, or were they like, wow, you're from here? Did you ever get any of that, or no?
It's kind of different. Your answer is like different, right? Depends on who asks. Because like if it's a Polynesian that asks you, you almost feel like, oh, I like, not that I have something to prove, but like, oh, you're from Laie, like, sure. Or like, oh, your dad must have been a BYU professor, right? Right. Like, you almost have to just bust out some pidgin just to be like, okay, yeah, I proved to you like I'm local. Right. But when it comes from somebody else, somebody from my culture, right, whether it's a BYU student or whether it's just somebody that I've met that's like, oh, you're from Hawaii. I don't know. It's almost like, oh, you lived a vacation. Like, oh, life is just you just living a vacation. And you think about like, man, there's so much that they like, so much richness in being from Hawaii that they just don't understand, and it's nothing that you can teach in a 1 hour session. Right. It's nothing that you can teach in a podcast. Right. But anybody that comes to Hawaii, I would just say like, have an open heart to go there to learn. Like that's the biggest thing that you can do. Don't go there like with a cup full, right? What they say, don't go, if you have your cup full, you're not going to be able to learn anything. So yeah, I mean,
sorry, now that you mention it, I think that's a lot of the reason why the community members clash with, the BYU students who come there, because their cup is already full, or, like they feel like they know already, or they, whatever their reasoning is, but there's that clash, right?
Well, and it's almost like you come in already thinking, you come in with stereotypes, you come in with whatever, like everybody's experiences in life are different. And that goes for both sides, right? But I remember like my wife saying when she's only telling me this recently, right? Since we've been married, she's like, yeah, I remember getting to BYU and like the BYU students were saying, oh yeah, watch out for the Laie boys. They're going to jump you. Like you're going to be walking. Don't go jogging at night. Like the Laie boys, like they had just no idea. Right. So people might come in and think like, oh, I'm here at BYU, but not realize that no, you're in the community. Right. You're part of something much bigger. Right? They don't know about the Koku Pride. They don't know about the history of the Hawaiian people, but they don't know about all these things. And so if you don't come in realizing, and that's the thing, is like anywhere else in the States, it's not like that. So you can't really have the expectation that they should know better. But if they come in willing to just break down their barriers. That's the thing with Polynesian people, right? Everybody's like, oh, they're so scary, but
right,
teddy bears, like get to know them, right? And that's the thing too. You just have to go in and really just take the time to get to know someone individually, as a community, as a society, as a nation. Like there's so much that can be learned if you just take the time, so.
That's crazy. Almost reminds me of, when you growing up next to the water, next to the ocean, there's sharks in the water. Mm-hmm. But if you tread lightly, or not tread lightly, but if you just respect the water and, respect that there are sharks there, then, you won't have any troubles or any run-ins with them.
Right.
But you acknowledge that they are there.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like a community, like we're there.
Yeah.
But if you feel like you're not respecting the water enough, and then the shark's going to bite you, which, people in the community are going to tell you or show you, that we're not, we're to be respected.
Yeah, if you're going out in the ocean and you hunt, if you're going out with your spear looking for sharks, like, okay, we're gonna come with our teeth and you're gonna see what we come in with.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the other side too, it's like coming to the mainland. There's like, I'm just gonna use an analogy, right? So in Hawaii we have cockroaches and we have centipedes, right? We're not that afraid of them because we know what to expect. You come to the mainland and all of a sudden there's snakes here in Utah. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to do if a snake comes? But other people are like, oh, you just grab them by the tail and throw them. So if you don't take the time to get to know someone, that's where you have, it's almost like a fear.
That disconnect.
It's that disconnect, and you have to take that time to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And so that's why anybody who would ever be like, oh, like it's just another haole. For me, I never took offense of it. Because I understand where they're coming from. I know that they've probably had experiences with other people, same with me. And so I know that, hey, I have to show you that what you've experienced might be true, but that's not me.
Right.
And I'm not going to be mad and defensive and hurt by what you're saying. So, I've taken that opportunity. Whether I remember being an insurance agent during when I was finishing up school at BYU, and my boss would send me out to the west side because he's like, oh, you know how to use your words, like you're really good as a salesperson, but you also get the local connection. So I would go over there and like knock on, auntie's door, or they might initially be like, who are you, but then I don't talk about life insurance, what I'm there for. I just talk about who I am, who you are, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, this guy's not just another haole who's over here just to sell me something or just to come and take something away from me or whatever. And you just break down that barrier. So that goes, I mean, from growing up all the way to my adult experience, you really just got to go in with an open heart and just be willing to learn, but also be willing to show that you can be more, that you can be better, you know?
I like how you brought that up and, you know, bridging the gap or bridging the disconnect. Mm-hmm. But another aspect that I wanted to bring up for you to touch on is the food aspect, maybe, with like everything shared and your perspective and your thoughts on that. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, not in Hawaii, it's not mi casa es tu casa, it's my fridge is your fridge. So like, come on over, whatever's in the fridge is yours. Like, that's the first thing. And that goes to, I mean, a party isn't a good party unless there's a lot of food, enough, not only enough for who's there, but enough to take home, right? But there's also a joke about who's coming over there, grabbing all the plates and taking them.
Exactly.
But at the same time, it's like, that's part of the culture, is like, mine is yours, and you almost, it's almost expected that, oh, yours is mine too. Not that you're like, oh, yours is mine in that attitude, but it's almost like you're so used to just sharing everything that you have that it becomes a part of who you are. So I think we were joking about this a little bit. I mean, my first experience going to the mainland, I went to the U for my freshman year after Kahuku. And I remember going with a friend. He's like, okay, we're going to go to the gym, but first we're going to stop by McDonald's. I was like, okay, so I was just like thinking what I was going to grab. Yeah. Before I know it, he already went order and drive through the drive-through, grab his own food and was eating. I was like, so they never even offer, or maybe I wanted to order my own food, even if you're not going to pay for them. But it's just something that you don't realize is part of your childhood until you get outside of it. You get outside of, your community. And so, yeah, it's just something that is awesome that we have back home, but I wish everybody else would learn. Same thing like on my mission.
Yeah, can you touch on that? I think that's a good experience, or it highlights what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I remember my first companion in the mission that was North American, right? And like every time I would cook food, I would just cook breakfast for both of us. Nothing big, right? A couple eggs or whatever. And then one morning I remember, this is like the first couple days of our transfer together. And I was like jumping in, getting ready in the shower. And I came out, I could tell he was cooking. And I came out and my man was just on the table eating his own breakfast and I was just like, my first reaction was like, this selfish guy over here. Like, but that's all he knows. Like, he doesn't know any better, right? So what I started doing was every time I would cook for him. Or every time I had to iron my shirt, I would just iron both of our shirts. I'd be like, I wouldn't even say, hey, I'm going to leave this out for you to iron. I'd be like, hey, pass me your shirt. Or I'm going to, shine our shoes or whatever. So by the end of the transfer, if I was cooking breakfast, he was ironing our shirts, or, same thing around. So it's something that can be learned, but it's definitely something that everybody should know. And it's not just our community too, the whole idea of like, I got you. It's not like, oh, I owe you. Okay. You owe me this so much, keeping a tally. Like nobody back home would ever be like, okay, you owe me $76 from the last 3 times we went. Like, nobody does that, So that's the awesome thing that it's not everybody's upbringing. So,
yeah. And especially like with our friends, like sometimes like this week I would have money and then next week I wouldn't. And then next week, my friend would have money when I didn't have money. And so it's just that I got you,
Yeah.
Like, oh, next week I got you. Or,
yeah. It's like when I say, hey, let's go eat, I never, somebody else like, oh, I don't have money. You're like, I never asked you if you have money. I just said, let's go eat. I got you. Like, there's nothing to it. So I think that's, something real cool that you grew up with, but you don't have everywhere. And you don't realize you don't have it again until you get out, until you move to Utah or until you meet someone else.
Until it's those experiences happen to you and be like, wait, what just happened?
Wait, that's not normal? Like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah. But I'm glad with the experience that you shared about your mission, I'm glad that you use that mindset, or you use, what am I trying to say? Where you be like, when you thought to yourself, man, I need to teach him, or it's going to be taught, you're going to see what I'm doing, and in turn, you're going to do it. And so eventually by the end of the transfer, I'm sure he was, what you talked about, like he caught on and you guys did the things that you guys.
Yeah. With almost anything that needs to be taught, like maybe I would have been justified in calling him out on it or being mad or holding a grudge. But I think everything that needs to be taught, you just have to think like, okay, Give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't understand. I mean, think about today what's going on, right? With all the race issues. Like my race issue was never a black and white, right? It was a Polynesian and a Laie thing, right? But it's the same thing. It's like, oh, they don't, like, I don't have the understanding of where they're coming from. So what do I need to do? Like, why is this person acting or feeling or showing his emotions in this way? I need to go out and I need to learn where he's coming from. And I think that just explains, like, that squashes all the issues. Like, someone always has a reason that they're hurt. And maybe I'm bringing that up because I have a lot of experience with my wife with her mental illness. Mm-hmm. One thing I learned is, like, feelings, there's no right and wrong of a feeling. Like, a feeling is just real. Right. It's just, it is or it isn't.
It's
like
the lived emotion.
It's a lived emotion. It's, I'm feeling hurt, and that feeling is real. Whether or not you feel like, oh, I never had the intention, like I didn't mean to hurt you, that doesn't matter. Like, what you're feeling is real. And so whenever somebody is coming with a different attitude, like, I don't know, it's not worth your time just getting all, defensive or mad about it. Like, it's just emotional. You know what? Just realize, where you're coming from. There's a reason why you're mad. It's probably not personal. It's not an attack at me. It's probably something that went on, and it's just something that I gotta show you. The opposite with love, and So,
dang,
that's my 2 cents.
That's deep, man, and that's something that we all can learn from. You want to talk about like Christmas bowls, Laie days, just stuff, like the things that we did. Right. Where like the community was involved. You want to talk about that in your perspective?
What a town, right? Like, that's where else in the world? I mean, ward camps. Think about ward camps. Like, where else in the world? And I don't know if they do it, but they should. Like, for a whole week, the whole ward goes together, and there's just one main tent, and everybody just sets up, and everybody's just together the whole week. And you share stuff, and you're together. Christmas bowl, Laie days, like, there's so much pride in the community.
Even state champs, maybe.
You ain't never seen a celebration like state champ or graduation. Like, right. I remember my dad just recently was telling me, I remember growing up saying, I'm never gonna go again to a graduation. And then he moved to Hawaii and went to a Koku grad, and he's like, this is what a graduation's all about. Right. There's just so much love and, like, seriously, how many people do you really know at a graduation other than the few relatives or people that you grew up with? But you're still there to support everybody. Like, exactly. At this point, like, I only graduated Koku 12 years ago, 08. But at this point, I feel like every time I go to a Koku game, my friends' younger siblings are already graduated. So it's like somebody's kids that is from older. You don't really personally know anybody on the Koku team, but you still there repping, for life. And that's just something that's really cool,
Were you, when Koku came up to play in Vegas, what was that team in Vegas? Yeah.
Bishop Gorman.
Were you there?
Oh,
were you in Utah at the time, or were you in Hawaii?
Yeah. And we were maybe a year only in St. George. Oh, okay. We drove down to Vegas. We was there for that.
Who travels like that, right?
For real. No matter where we are, we show up. So that's, win, lose, or draw. Red Sea is coming. So, yeah. Yeah.
And then another thing I wanted to bring up too is that mentality of give, don't take. Or, the more you take, the less you have. Right. Can you talk on that, or what you think, what's your thoughts on that?
Whew. You could almost say that sums up Laie people right there, right? That's the stereotype, that the history of my culture, right? And I'm American, but also other ethnic backgrounds from European descent. But that's kind of been our mentality is, okay, America, mine, put my flag, mine. Come to Hawaii, there wasn't even a thing of land ownership, right? If you think about the Great Mahele that happened in 1848, where a bunch of white people were like, hey, king, like, you should probably give private ownership of land, right? It's just a bunch of business owners that want to come and make claim and profit. So, I know I kind of started off going pretty deep on that, but the mentality is kind of the same of why there's a clash in Hawaii between any haole, Palagi, however you want to call it, is because the mentality of I'm here to take care of my own and I'm only here to benefit me and maybe my family, right? Whereas the village mentality isn't deep rooted in our blood, right? We have the colonization mentality, right? And I'm gonna take, and not as much. What can I give back?
Right.
Like, what am I contributing to my society? Where am I adding value? And what a powerful thing to have now in business, in a lot of different ways that you guys can express that same feeling of saying, hey, I'm not here just for me. I'm here to give back. I'm here to, express what value I have and what I bring to the table. It is a powerful thing. And so I kind of understand a lot of, I wouldn't even say hate, but the hesitation, to when a haole would come to the island, because it's just part of everything they know. And they think that they can just come and lay claim to whatever they need. And that's something really powerful that I've learned from our community is you don't show up and ask, hey, like, I'm only here to grab a plate and jam. Like, I'm here to help set up. I'm here to help clean up. And if I get a plate lunch on my way home, great.
Right.
And that's just a small example, but the same thing goes with the whole village mentality. I mean, even back to the Hawaiian culture, you think about the ahupua'a system.
Yep.
There, like, everything from the mountain to the ocean was the village, and you had stewardship over the land, and you gave back to the land because the land fed you, right. And so it's just a deep-rooted principle of, if you come and you just take, then there's not going to be anything left for you, for your children. And then on top of that, you're not really helping anyone else around you. It's an interesting thing that I'm just grateful that I grew up not having that mentality of other people that might be in this world, not to say that that's every white person in the world, right? Or even the majority at this point in 2020, maybe, but it's just something that is a blessing to have from the Polynesian culture, to have that mentality of I'm here to give a little bit more than just love, service. Like, isn't that what being a Laie boy is all about? Like, it's all about love and it's all about service. You don't ask, what's in it for me. You always are just there to support, to love, whatever that means. So if everybody in the world grew up in Laie or grew up on Oahu or in Hawaii or wherever, anywhere in Polynesia, they're going to learn that. So what a great thing. I feel blessed to have understood that.
Shoot, I'm glad that you brought that up and that you were able to articulate it as well as you did. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was talking about titles and stewardship and responsibility, and what your thoughts are, living in Laie and on that as well.
Yeah, these are always something like things that intrigue me, like the whole idea of people having their name change because they were given or handed down a title.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that was always something I didn't really understand, right? So I wanted to learn more about it. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm not claiming that I have a good grip on the culture or how it works. But I think it's a really cool thing that you always have to be thinking about. I have a responsibility to help, whether it's my family or the village that I come from, or just whatever it is, the stewardship of it, right?
I guess the question for me is, with your perspective and with your experiences, what are we as a Polynesian people maybe capable of that we don't see for ourselves, that maybe you see, from your experiences and your what you've come to know?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say there's no limitation. Like, don't let yourself think that I have to do yate for the rest of my life. Not to say that's not an amazing thing, right? But don't limit yourself to what you think an island boy should be doing. I think that the Polynesian people have the capacity and the heart and the love and the drive and the determination to accomplish anything. And that's why, really ask yourself what motivates you, what gets you up in the morning, make a goal and go for it, and branch out. I think that there's a lot of pride that can be had. I know sometimes it might feel like you're going against the grain, right? Maybe your parents might be like, no, you don't, right. That's not, I expect you to do this. But I think that there's so much that can be had in whatever avenue or industry and business, not just business, right? Yeah. But what capacities? I would just say you have the same, if not more, capacity to do because you were raised with such a discipline and with such a passion for everything that you do. Man, don't limit yourself.
Dang, I like that answer. And then also alongside with what we're capable of, what are some things as Polynesians that you feel that we have to unlearn, or maybe things we have to change within, maybe whether it's our culture or whether it's ourselves or, as a people?
I think this is one that a lot of people would agree on. I think when it comes to mental health, because that's something that's so close to home for me. My wife being from the Philippines, it's the same thing in the Filipino culture. Like, you don't necessarily talk about your emotions. It's not okay to cry. It's not okay to be vulnerable. It's not a sign of strength to feel a certain way. So I'd say that's one thing. Don't be afraid to go through whatever process of emotions that you have, and also don't be afraid to talk about it, because the stigma against mental health, and this goes against all cultures and backgrounds, right? The stigma of saying that something's wrong with you, right? Is something that can definitely change. And it's hard too, because how do you teach that to the older generation, right? How do you go to dad and be like, Dad, you messed me up? But you don't, right? You just say, hey, I'm able to accept and be okay with what I'm feeling, with whatever I'm going through. So that's one thing for sure. I think another thing too is the idea of limiting yourself. I think a lot of times we have our own insecurities, we have a lot of reasons why we tell ourselves we shouldn't do something. So I think we give ourselves a hard enough time. So one thing that I would say too, we're a very playful people in a village too, right?
Right.
But if you think about a lot of the slang that we have in our community, as playful as it is, it kind of has a negative impact, right? The intention might not be a negative one. And I think that I've come to the realization that you don't want to, you want to come off as being humble, right? You guys just recently talked about this. You don't want to look like, oh, I'm proud, I'm boasting about myself. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put myself down in a joke, right? Or what am I going to do? We're just going to tease that person about whatever they're going through. I don't know, to lighten the mood. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of different reasons why it happens. But if you think about a lot of the slangs that we have, right? It all started, however many years ago from generations. But, like, it started off with, oh, really? Or then it goes to like, don't explain it. Or then give you
no,
this guy right here. Or, then all of a sudden it's like, don't tap me.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Or, and then it becomes like, just, there's a lot of different ways that it basically brings you down, right? Because then you're like, oh, I can't really talk about my successes because then I sound like I'm boasting.
Exactly.
But really, a lot of what I've learned in business is surround yourself by successful people, surround yourself with positivity, surround yourself with somebody who can talk about your life goals, talk about your ambitions, talk about, man, what do you got going on? And so we can chop it up and say, hey, how am I going to help you reach your goal? Because we have that in our community.
For sure.
We're all about like, I want to help you. Right. So we just got to get past the surface teasing of being like, hey, because again, it's not a bad thing. And I use it just as much.
Right.
But does it prevent us from having those deeper conversations? Does it stop us right there of being like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to explain it,
Exactly.
Because if you can talk about it and tease, but then you can be like, hey, no, for real, like, tell me about that though. Let's talk about this. Then you're good. But don't let it be a reason to say, like, let's not.
Then use one of those.
Let's not go deeper. Yeah, I love having conversation. I mean, shoot, sitting around the mix can be a great thing because you can really explain your life or really say like, what do you got going on, or how do you feel about this? And you can really talk about things. I love having those conversations. Like, even if you haven't seen or been with some of the boys, you can hit them up and it's like, you never skipped a beat, right? But you can have those conversations. And those are the types of people that are going to be the long-term relationships. Those are going to be the people that are going to take you to the next level, and that you're going to say, oh yeah, you was there from the beginning. And now that I made it, you still there with me, because you wasn't one of them bagging on me or being a hater or whatever. You was there pushing me along. Those are the type of people that we need to have in our life, Yeah.
Man, I'm glad you touched on those 2 points, I feel like those are 2 great points that as we continue to hear, these things that we need to unlearn and change, that as we continue to hear them more often, that it'll be a change, like a real change, Yeah. And sometimes it's a coping mechanism, that instead of talking about what, the deeper meanings or issues, then you're like, oh, shut up, don't explain it, and people throw that out there just so they don't talk about the real issues. And, and then going back to what you said about, with the mental health or just these certain issues that, our parents, and not going back to our parents and blaming them, but, our parents did the best they could with what they knew. Mm-hmm. And, when they were here or just moving here to the States or to US, they were just in survival mode. And,
exactly.
We have the luxury of unpacking or even just truly learning how to, talk about our issues, or even, the capacity to. So I feel like those are 2 great points that you brought up. And I guess just to wrap this all up, the last question that I have for you is using your white privilege growing up as a minority, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think I have a really good standing ground because I can relate to both sides, right? One of the things when it comes to certain topics is, if a Hawaiian is going to go start talking to a haole who doesn't know anything, right? They're going to get defensive. But if I feel like if I have use those same words, the same tone, and have the same conversation with that haole, they're going to be like, oh, like he's just trying to help me understand where he's coming from.
Right.
Where it feels like if it's coming from the other side, it's an attack, right? So I feel like that's been a huge blessing for me, being able to relate, to the Polynesian side of growing up, having conversations on both sides. But as far as the white privilege goes, you realize certain things when you're not the majority. I mean,
right.
I'm not ever going to say that, oh, I know what it's like, right? But growing up in Hawaii, I was the minority. And then that was a blessing for me. But I felt like maybe there were certain things that I didn't have to go through. I didn't have to feel like I have to prove to anyone. I didn't feel like I didn't have to overcome all these negative stereotypes, or I feel like I was necessarily judged a certain way, so having that perspective is huge, because what I feel right now is a lot of people are just basing everything off of their personal experience, and because they don't know the other side, to them it's not a problem. That's not like racism. That's not real. Like, it's not like that in Utah. Like, it's not like that for you because you are the majority. You never had to, get eyed when you're walking into the store, or you never, had these issues that you just take for granted. You've had the privilege, right? That's the explanation. It's not to make you feel bad for being white. It's not to shame you for saying like, oh, you had a head start in life. No, it's just saying like, you had a different walk of life, and other people had to go through certain things that maybe you didn't. You have a lot of different privileges in this world. As an American, we have huge privileges, having served in a third world country, and my wife being from a third world country, right, from the Philippines. Like, I remember my father-in-law, we finally got his visa and he came to visit. I remember getting up early to go to work, and my man was awake, like in the kitchen, like kind of flustered. I was like, "Hey, Paul, what's going on?" He's like, "I'm just trying to warm up my water." I was like, "Oh, here's the microwave." And like, he had never used a microwave in his life. And you think about it like, whoa, that's an American privilege. Like, right, that's and there's other countries that have microwaves, right? So that's a first world privilege that you have. And when you look about it that way, it's something to be grateful for, but it's also something to take a step back and say, hey, if I had the opportunity to give someone a microwave, then I'm going to do it, right? So I want the same privileges that I've had for everyone else. And that's how I need to look at it, right? Like, if Polynesians or if the Black community is feeling like they never had the same opportunities, then what I want to do is make sure that they do. I'm not going to be defensive and be like, well, this or that. That's just where I'm coming from, right? So there's a privilege of that. I've heard it explained that there's other privileges, like being a Christian. Like, why do we have a national holiday as Christmas? We're blessed in this nation, right, that nobody has to work on Christmas, right? Or unless you're working at the shops, right? But maybe somebody who's Muslim, they don't necessarily have that privilege. Their holidays aren't national holidays, right? So we have a Christian privilege in this country. There's a lot of different privileges. So I think when we understand what that means to have a privilege, it's not saying that you're a bad person, but it's just to say that I've had different experiences, and there might have been certain barriers that other people had to go through, and we should right those wrongs, So, yeah, I mean, for the last 3 years, I was an employer doing all the hiring, right? And this is, shame to say that my employer was like, oh yeah, like, these people usually aren't hard workers. But it was a good way to say, hey, let's hire all the Latinos because, they're really, really good cleaners. And also maybe they don't speak English, so it's harder for them to get other jobs. So maybe they're not going to leave us. So there's kind of an explanation to it. But if you're like, oh yeah, if you see a Black name on the application, don't like, whoa, yeah. That's something that I don't experience. For you to be like applying for whatever job you're looking for, if I look at the two names on paper and somebody initially is like, bottom of the stack, like, that's a privilege I have, right? Because most likely the hiring manager, the boss, the owner, and majority of society and the customers are white. Yep. And so we just have that natural tendency to have bias, and so it's something that I hope we can look towards and just say, hey, we can be better. There's always something to learn. Like, America is an amazing country, but we can be better, So that's my take on that. And I'm sorry that I started talking issues that are going on there with the nation, right? Makes you talk about the topic. But again, growing up in Hawaii just makes you realize you're not the only one on this planet. Like, life isn't just about you. Like, step outside your world, realize that there's other people, other cultures, other experiences. And there's so much to learn. So
crazy, man. Whew. I'm just grateful, that with your experiences and with your perspectives coming on the podcast, and just especially like speaking to what you've experienced. And especially for me, like taking for granted what I've been born and raised into, whereas for you being the minority, you know, but you also wanting to close that gap, like we talked about earlier, you know, wanting to bridge that gap of understanding. And with everything that I take for granted, you wanted to learn and wanted to be a part of, and in wanting to do so, you're able to, you know, learn and understand, and also at this point articulate, you know. And so I'm just grateful that, you know, you took the opportunity to come up here, you know, do the podcast and just expand, or just for us, you know, open up our minds to the things that we took for granted, you know, and also to articulate it in a way that is just so grateful. But, you know, or for me, at least for me, I'm just grateful that you did so. But like my brother-in-law said, shout out to Ants. You know, he what he said was, you're the realest white boy to come out of Laie. So,
Oh, wow. All right, you know, I'll take that.
I guess just to end, just to wrap all of this up, I just have a few questions just to get to know you better. Like rapid fire questions. The first thing that comes to mind, let us know. But what takes up too much of your time?
Takes up too much of my time? Probably my phone, which is not a good thing, right? My wife would tell me I'm always on my phone. So being a parent, I can be better at that. But when I'm not on social media too much of the time, I like to learn, whether it's about mental health or with real estate investing. I'm just, you know, doing everything I can to learn. So,
what do you wish you knew more about? I guess you kind of mentioned it already, huh?
Yeah.
Real estate investing, or you can touch on something else.
Yeah, as far as setting up my future for wealth, understanding how money works and how, you know, my money can work for me is something that I'm always learning. The whole idea of the 40-40-40 plan. You work 40 hours a week for 40 years of your life, you know, and make $40,000 a year. Like the mentality of you have to work for somebody and make their money for their business. Exactly. Like that's definitely something that I'm hungry to learn, and, you know, it keeps me going. So
what or who inspires you?
Man, anybody really who's passionate about something, anybody who's shown that they're going to turn their adversities into blessings. It doesn't have to be on any specific topic, but it just keeps me going too. If I can hear about somebody else's story, if I can hear about somebody else's drive or what, you know, that's something that inspires me.
Awesome. What are some things that you had to unlearn?
Dang. I'd probably just say, unlearn the privileges that you have and realize that that's not the case for everybody. I'd say that's probably a big one, and I'm still in the process of that. You still realize, like, oh, some of the things you say could have been hurtful, or some of the things that you think applies to everyone doesn't. So there's a lot of that, and it's almost like I feel like I never learned that, to unlearn it. Yeah. But it's just something that you just take on as life based on your experiences. So
I like that. What's your favorite book?
Shoot, I don't know. That's a hard one. I listen to a lot of ebooks right now. I'm going to use a slang. People are going to call me 2 mils for this. No, but I'm listening to just like gospel books. There's a book about the Melchizedek priesthood that I'm listening to right now. Okay. That's really good. I like a lot of biographies, learning about people's lives and what they've learned. Because if I can learn from somebody else that's trying to do what I'm trying to do, you know, I can get a head start. So,
if you could spend the day to pick their brain with someone from the past, present, or future, who would it be for knowledge?
Wow. Man, that's a really good question. One person, huh? I'm just gonna jam with Bob Marley for a little bit. Just gonna learn about just vibe to his music and learn about his philosophies. I feel like he he had a lot of great things that we overlook, a lot of his quotes. So I'm going to say Bob Marley.
He was ahead of his time, yeah?
Yeah.
What's special about the place you grew up?
Man, we are the biggest family that you ever knew. So.
And legit, that's my cousin, yeah?
That's my cousin.
What have you only recently formed an opinion about?
Probably immigration, things like that. Going through the process with my wife, she just became a citizen today. So that's been since being married, like grew up. I didn't even realize half of my friends, like families were immigrants, and like, oh, you just realize like, oh, you're Tongan, you're Samoan, you're Filipino, like great. But what's your story? What's the immigration? I love to learn more about that, and how it works.
What song will guarantee to make you dance?
Lucky Dube, anything from Lucky Dube, but
nice.
Probably Release Me from Lucky Dube or Romeo and Juliet.
What's the luckiest thing that's happened to you?
I mean, I don't know if I believe in luck, because I believe we're given opportunities and things are placed in our past, but I'd say I'm pretty lucky that my parents ended up finding a job and staying in Hawaii, and I was raised in Hawaii. Like that's, you know, what a blessing.
What are you most looking forward to in the next 10 years?
I am looking forward to my real estate investment opportunities, and I really want to be able to give back in that way, teaching other people what it like home ownership, how to invest, things like that. So I look forward to being able to just have an opportunity to live the life that I want to live on my own terms, and be able to give back and help other people do the same, achieve everyone else's goals.
What could you give a 40-minute presentation on with no preparation?
Shoot. With no preparation, I could probably just talk about this right here, what we're talking about right now. Mental health, talk about real estate, could talk about the gospel, the village, could talk about Kahuku football.
What hobby would you get into if time and money weren't an issue?
I'd like to get back to being outdoors a little bit more. I felt like growing up, we was always outdoors doing something, but so Southern Utah has a lot of great parks and hikes and things like that. So I want to start getting back out, exploring new hikes and trails and things like that. So
when people come to you for help, what do they usually need help with?
Recently it's been like asking me about their experience buying a home, like, hey, I'm thinking about buying a home, and they got questions about real estate, things like that.
What is something you think everyone should do at least once in their life?
Everyone should go to the Philippines and go island hopping with me and my wife, because we gonna be the best tour guides. Come on, cousins, come on down. It's the cheapest vacation. And in the
the Philippines.
Come to the Philippines. So we're from Hawaii, but I think Philippines is pretty paradise too. So
what helps you live in the moment?
I don't know, just enjoying the feelings that I have. Trying to make memory. I'm all about making memories. So just remembering, like, I want to be able to look back. I want my kids to be able to have this fun memory, just like I do looking back on my childhood. So just try to make it, have experiences and make memories.
Which of your scars has the best story behind it?
Shoot, I haven't like broke a bone in my body or have many scars. Probably when I went give myself the Uso burn with a hot nail and when carved the Laie boys right here in my head. Stupid kids, huh? But
that's funny. If you could give back, and the last question is, if you could give back to the village, how or what would you do?
I think with what I've got going on, helping others, whether it's back home or wherever they are, just learn to build wealth for their future. I feel like living in Hawaii, we almost feel like it's kind of a trap. Buying a home seems impossible. A lot of people don't even realize what the steps are. Like, should I go talk to somebody and see, can I even get pre-approved and what I need to do to prepare, or like credit repair? Not that I know any of these things, but like the idea of just not being stuck in a job and feeling like you're going nowhere.
Right.
So if I can help people invest into their future, then I think we'd be farther ahead, and I think our parents would be happy,
Exactly.
So that's something that I'm hopeful that I can do.
Well, again, Kyle, appreciate the time. Appreciate you coming out here, spending the time to tell your story, share your story. Man, it's been awesome, not only for me, but I'm sure for, the people in the community who don't think nothing of, the experiences that we go through, because it is what it is. But to hear it from someone else and from your perspective, I think it'll be great for people not only to reminisce about our childhood, but just to think, oh, that's why we did that, or, oh, dang, this is something that we, that we were ingrained in us. But yeah, man, appreciate it.
Yeah, there's so much that can be shared. I'm grateful that you guys thought of me to come on here, humbled, and if anybody can learn, then we can do it together. And so I'm grateful to be here. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you. Well, again, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Village Made podcast. From my village to yours. Remember, it takes a village to raise a child. Laie, boys.